you, Megan. I want to thank everyone on this webinar, the LunchMAR webinar, for joining us today. We now have 85 folks. This is great. We have a really great panel of presenters lined up for you today to talk about strategies related to connecting dots. So this is, in my mind, bringing together renewable energy, repurposing land use in the valley related to Sigma implementation, and looking for strategies to replenish our depleted aquifers. And our presenters today will begin providing some more detail of how we can connect those dots for multiple benefits. So we have Peter Nico. He's the Deputy Director with Geosciences at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And his focus is on soil and environmental biochemistry, which wants to understand the impact and fate and transport of environmental contaminants. And when it comes to groundwater recharge, that is a really important aspect. We also have Gerald Robinson. He's also with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Program Manager of the Building Technology and Urban Systems Division. Gerald really focuses on the development of specs, grid interconnections, the challenges related to that, and system commissioning. Our third presenter will be Brian Ross, who's joining us today from DC, but his focus is on the Great Plains. And Brian is Vice President of the Great Plains Institute, nationally recognized for their work on renewable energy planning, land use, and zoning, and with a focus on climate action and sustainability projects across the Midwest. I also want to give a shout out to Margaret Taylor, a senior scientist with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Margaret was part of the groupthink for today's presentations. She is traveling though, and was not able to join us. So with that, I'd like to now turn it to you, Peter, to start the presentations.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Gerald's just going to launch our presentation here. And as was already said, we're talking about solar, and the idea of electricity and water that are important for all of us. And so if we go to the next slide, we already just saw that, so we can skip on to our next one, and we're skipping this as well too, because it's a duplicate of our question before. So really what we're going to do today is I'm going to give some very quick introduction ideas of why we're here and why we think this is interesting to present to this group. And then Brian and Gerald are really going to present the meat of what it is that we have to say. And then hopefully we'll have a lot of good discussion time left at the end. So if we look at the next slide here, really how we got here as an LBL team is that Gerald and his team and people who work on that, we're working on solar PV systems and inspection of systems that have flooded and have in fact been damaged during flooded have really shown that the idea that it would not be technically very hard to engineer out floodability risk in these systems. And in fact, the engineering of floodable solar systems is a very plausible, practical thing to do. Meanwhile, some of us in the earth sciences, geosciences side of LBL have been working on FloodMAR in various ways. Our own Greg Ulrich presented in this form a few months ago, mostly on the surface and down part. But we started talking about how do we bring these two things together, and where's the value here? And really we started thinking about anything that creates new potential siting opportunities is good kind of for both systems, both the electricity and the flooding. So we can think of citing things that are intentionally flooded, like FloodMAR we're talking about here, and maybe some water quality positive impacts. Places that naturally flood occasionally, that's on our minds a lot this year in California. Places on coastal areas that are maybe dealing with saltwater intrusion and so on. But this idea of opening up siting opportunities and multiple use ideas. So if we go to the next slide, we can say really, what are we trying to address? And that there's advantages on both sides. As solar PV grows in lots of different places, many of us have noticed that finding locations to put that solar is not impossible, but it's becoming increasingly controversial. Communities do or don't want it. People do or don't want to put it on their land. If they want to repurpose farmland, they maybe do or don't want to put it on farmland. And land is expensive and land is valuable. And so you want to get the most out of your land. So there can be important aspects and community and ecological benefits of solar PV if we can bring them in the right way. On the FloodMAR side, we talk a lot about using land. We talk a lot about land repurposing. On the other hand, as I said, land is valuable, so you want to get the most out of land. You don't want to necessarily, if you do something like repurpose it to solar, damage the soil underneath your system. So is there a way to do things in a way that you get co-benefits out of using that land for multiple things, as we said, for revenue, for benefits for the soil management, for things for community and other ecological benefits? And so there's really an opportunity to potentially bring these two ideas together to really make the best use of our land and steward it the best possible way. So if we go to the next slide. Oops. Good eye. So this is where we're going to launch our first. So this is why we're presenting, is that we're interested in this. We see potential in it. We think it's interesting. We're looking for other people's opinions, people who know their land, know FloodMAR, know a lot of things that we don't, and thinking about collaborators and people who are interested in further exploring this one with us, with the potential for demonstration projects and really bringing this out and digging into these aspects of it and turning it from kind of an idea into a reality. And so now I think we had our first poll question, and then as that launches, I'm actually going to hand the conversation over to Brian at this point as we answer our first poll question. So thank you.
So your poll is live. I think Peter and Gerald, you should be able to see results coming in as co-hosts.
We can. And
can you? Okay, great. So you can see we've got 52 out of 91 folks participated. So let's leave it open for another couple of moments here. The question is, do you see value in improving the business on new revenue sources, case for repurposed agricultural land? Yes, no, maybe, no opinion.
And I think we're stabilizing at this point, if we want to.
Okay, looks like it. Oh
right.
No, we just got an upsurge. A little uptick.
When I said that, everybody decided they wanted to vote still.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Let's share the results. Overwhelmingly,
oh, good. So we can continue our presentation then. So with that, Ryan, why don't you take it away?
All right. Hello, everyone. If you can hear me, I'm Brian Ross with the Great Plains Institute, and one of the things that I just wanted to introduce was to explore a little bit was this concept of initiative that we're working on, which is what we call the co-benefits approach to large-scale solar. As Peter had noted, there's a lot of increasing difficulty of siting solar arrays. And one of the reasons is because there is a perception in the community that it's the host community that they're not benefiting from it. And so we are trying to change that perception, build some what we call social license to operate for large-scale solar by demonstrating that actually you can achieve a lot of co-benefits if you're a solar host site, and that's kind of one of the pieces that is kind of supporting this concept of solar MAR as we've been discussing it with our team for a little bit. Okay, next slide. So exactly what is a co-benefit? Many people on the call probably are quite familiar with this term, but I thought that I would go ahead and describe it here. Co-benefits are recognizing that when we enact a policy, many times those policies have other impacts, and some of them are very positive. We call those co-benefits. It may not. It is a benefit, although it is not the intended benefit of the particular policy or initiative. And as in the IPCC report here noted, that we look back on it, because this is a concept that's been around for some time, that sometimes the co-benefit is at least as equally important as the intended benefit of the initiative. And the kind of literature kind of breaks the co-benefits up into a number of different buckets. You can see some of them here: economic, environmental, social, political, with a number of different categories of things, ranging from improved habitat to improved financial viability for landowners. You know, and this is a you know, kind of a fairly complicated thing to go into, and there's a lot of literature on the economic modeling and cost benefit side of environmental policy that goes into this. Go to the next slide. But what we'd like to talk about with communities when we talk about this co-benefit approach is if what you want to do is restore the watershed functions of your community, or you want to diversify your agricultural base, you want to enhance habitat or protect drinking water supplies, and you can successfully do that, doesn't really matter if it's a solar farm, because the solar farm is many times just the vehicle by which we can achieve these other things. And we would really like to explore how that's going to work with the concept of managed aquifer recharge, and whether or not that can make sense as a co-benefit that is maybe more important in some cases to the people involved than the solar production would be. All right, next slide. We do have a lot of scientific research that's been done around this concept of co-benefits. This is one example that we did in the Midwest. We were involved with a couple of years ago, where they evaluated the different ecosystem services that can be provided if you design solar farms to actually achieve these co-benefits. And what they discovered was with the appropriate kind of vegetative ground cover, like you see in the picture behind this, that there was actually a significant increase, a threefold increase in pollinator activity, which is obviously beneficial to some forms of agriculture as well as just natural habitat. A 65 increase in carbon storage potential in the soils, and an increase in the increase in sediment and water retention on site. So in other words, in a dramatic and significant decrease in erosion and runoff. Next slide. And we have kind of taken that research and applied it in a number of different ways. These are all projects that we've been working on either in the Midwest or in some cases nationally, where we've looked and how we can design solar in a way such that it's habitat friendly, but we like to take it a step further and actually say it's habitat enhancing to the local community. There's a lot of research around that run by several of our national labs on this topic called the Inspire Project. There's also a project that we just finished on solar stormwater amenities, where we looked at how we can design systems to actually create water quality amenities, surface water quality amenities, by increasing infiltration on site with right characteristics, especially when you're replacing agriculture. We're starting a new initiative right now where we're actually trying to protect source water supplies. And I'll talk about this one in a little bit more detail in a minute. But there's also initiatives about integrating agriculture, such as building soil health and actual agricultural activities on site while you're also doing solar production, if you design the site and you do your ground covers right. And also something that we would kind of broadly characterize as carbon negative solar, where we're capturing or preventing carbon by the production of zero carbon energy, but also sequestering carbon in the soils through the appropriate use of a ground cover that will do that. Okay, next slide. the way we kind of look, there's two elements really to how you capture co-benefits. And I'm a land use planner by training, and so I always think of these kinds of things. Siting, which is where should the solar go in order to capture co-benefits. So kind of the location decisions. And we look to how there's potential conflicts or synergies with existing community resources or existing development goals within the community. And in the case of the managed aquifer recharge concept, some of the things we thought of is where currently is agriculture not sustainable due to lack of water resources, or where even if it's not sustainable, do you want to discourage non-agricultural land uses? Just because agriculture may not be sustainable because of the water resource, it doesn't mean that you want to put housing there. So there are some characteristics about retaining that land over the long run for other purposes. Where is watershed function and infiltration and groundwater resources? Where can you contribute to managed aquifer recharge in specific locations? And where in those same areas do you have potential for things like habitat restoration that will go along and be co-located with your solar array? Okay, next slide. And the second component of this, after you figure out where it should go, is how you should build it, or site design, siting and site design. And this is where you decide, how do we design the solar array such that the racking system is going to be high enough to allow for the targeted flood depths when we're going to flood that site in order for managed aquifer recharge. What kind of native or naturalized ground cover do you want to make sure you're putting in place in the development process, the solar development process, in order to stabilize soils or to integrate with local habitat? There's a number of different considerations depending on the site and the local ecosystem that you might want to consider in terms of the kind of site design and how you're designing selecting, installing, and maintaining the ground cover over time. And then things like, how do you do array spacing in your solar system, the kind of space between the different arrays in the solar farm, in order to make sure you're accommodating a self-sustaining ground cover in a flooded environment. So there's a number of different design considerations, not all of which we have ascertained here, but I just thought I'd put out a few examples of this. So really appropriately sited and designed solar installations are something that can provide a lot of benefits. And the example that we're currently working on that I mentioned earlier is what we call our DWISMA solar, which is it's an acronym in Minnesota where we're doing the pilot, drinking water supply management areas. And we are looking at how do we have areas where there are groundwater, source water, wellhead protection areas in nitrate contaminated drinking water supplies. And so how do we actually, there's a great deal of effort, how do we lower those nitrate levels in these vulnerable groundwater supplies? And in order to try to defer or avoid completely expensive, a $3 million drinking water treatment facility that will remove the nitrates and also provide different kinds of co-benefits. And this is something that we're doing by siting solar arrays, or we're getting ready to site solar arrays on these wellhead protection areas in order to take the land out of agriculture, because right now it's primarily in agriculture is prime farmland, but still provide an income stream for the landowner, which for a solar farm is actually going to provide in the Midwest, where we have quite high land prices for agriculture, will still actually anywhere from 2 to 3 times provide a return to the landowner. And so they're actually very interested in it, because obviously if they can avoid having to deal with nitrate contamination in their agricultural operations, plus get to a return on their land that's going to be 2 to 3 times what they would get for agricultural rents, that's very good. Local communities love to see it because it enhances their local tax base, as well as, of course, avoiding large drinking water treatment facilities, and also just the health and safety benefits of this. Okay, next slide. We actually did an analysis across Minnesota to see whether or not this was something we could do at scale, and discovered that in the high vulnerability and very high vulnerability areas of these source water protection areas, we had something like areas that were already in cropland, enough for many gigawatts of solar in Minnesota. This is enough to more than meet kind of the near-term goals, the kind of 2030 goals of solar deployment, without putting solar on other forms of land and providing all these co-benefits associated with protecting groundwater and source water. So next slide. And the program that we're engaging in is really kind of just getting started, where we have kind of 3 steps we're doing. We're creating partnerships and doing planning and decision making. We're identifying kind of the market policy and program innovations to make sure that we're actually we're integrating this with the existing kind of policies in the existing agricultural and drinking water protections that are already in place in these areas, and then to design and implement some demonstration or pilot projects so that we can show everyone that it does in fact work, and how you might design and site these solar arrays in such a way as to provide the co-benefits, which are of primary concern to the host communities. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on, I think, to Gerald at this point.
Yeah, we have
after we do another poll question.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, poll 3 should be live. Would native ground cover combined with SolarMAR be of value? Yes, no, or not viable in California without the use of large amounts of irrigation water?
This Kamyar, while folks are responding to that, I'll read a couple of the questions that have come into chat. One is, how could SolarMAR be linked to battery storage that could provide power to pump stations during power losses during storms? And then the other is, how can solar enhance the local tax base over the long term in the context of local revenue challenges in California?
Do we want to answer those now or at the end of the?
I think if it feels right, we can answer it now. But if it's going to be covered later in the presentation, we can deal with it.
The first question will be covered. Yeah. I think Brian can probably answer the second. But
Great.
Should we just proceed?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Great. Great questions. And
so Gerald, did you want me to answer that now, or do you want to push that off to the end?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I mean, why not? Yeah, go ahead, since it's hot on our minds. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the second question was related to the tax revenue?
Yes. How can solar enhance local tax base?
Yeah, well, and this is something that, not being from California and having a great grasp on the kind of tax revenue issue. I have to answer this a little bit generically, but what we have seen is that that regardless, almost in any state that we've worked in, the tax base that is for a solar farm, the way it is treated in the tax code, is almost always better than agriculture, and so there is almost always a benefit to the local community from a tax-based standpoint. We have seen some communities, in fact, in other states, where the development of renewable energy resources, and this is both solar and wind energy, have actually created a revenue boom for them that is their largest tax revenue source. Now, I have to answer that generically again. I don't know California tax code, so hopefully I'm not stepping out of line and out over my skis, as we might say in Minnesota.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. Well, good. Well, let's march forward. I see we've got our poll results. Megan, did you want to talk about those, or we're pretty self-explanatory, I guess, right?
Pretty self-explanatory, but about
Okay.
50% participation rate, with 95% of folks saying yes, it would be of value.
Great. Okay, that is fantastic. Okay. Let's see, I'm not sure if the poll is okay. There we go. So I'm going to quickly run over some of the facets of what we think is involved with SolarMAR, and this is our initial list based on our experience. I've worked a lot with storm damage, solar PV systems, so I see a lot of things in the field. So one of the first things that we looked at was the idea is, okay, what if we created a floodable solar array that could be placed on, SAGB. I assume this group knows what SAGB is, correct? Okay, Mark.
Yes,
okay.
we do, Gerald.
So what we did is we said, okay, if we're going to create floodable solar arrays and we place them on excellent or good or moderately good soils on the SAGB index, then we overlaid transmission system on top of that, and solar resource. So what we came up with was this initial map here, and it was surprising in terms of the overlay between these things. So good soils for managed aquifer recharge, great solar resource, and transmission resources. So that was a interesting surprise. So we believe the potential is there. We have not tallied acreage. So here's just a quick snapshot of that same map up close, showing the three layers. Again, very, very intriguing, I'd say. So here we also asked ourselves, well, since California has a lot of solar installations already, perhaps there's a lot already in these areas, and the answer is no, there's a lot more to go. So you can see in the green here, these green shaded areas or green highlighted areas, that's where existing systems are. And you can see the SAGB soils really don't have a lot yet. So another good indication. So we also wanted to talk a little bit about the engineering facets of what would be involved in creating something that's floodable. And we really believe that this is probably the easiest challenge of this concept. And, some of the, things I think Brian touched upon, elevations, we have foundations, civil challenges in preventing soil scour from water velocity, enclosures, wire routing, corrosion, humidity, thermal cycling. But we all believe those topics are very, very addressable. And then on the business case, and I'm going to answer that first question, we obviously see solar lease revenue here, but we also see a real opportunity for what we call an enhanced use lease. So that would be a lease that has a clause that allows the landowner to receive benefits for their site needs. So in the case of, let's say, cold storage or pumping, you could have in that lease that developer provide you power, and you could ask for resilient power. So that would include a battery, so that your pumping is backed up with resilient power as part of the lease. So we call those things, again, enhanced clauses in leases. So very common. We also believe that there's reason to look at carbon offsets. And then we think that as a potential revenue source, and we also think that the financial services industry, while this may be new to them, we think we could easily de-risk this approach so that, insurance and bonding can proceed, and that the folks that do the financing from construction, tax equity, and long-term investors can be satisfied. And then, we see really programmatic development is probably the biggest challenge here, and that is, pulling together the key stakeholders, the developers, water agencies, perhaps energy commission, environmental groups, authorities having jurisdiction, AHJs, codes and standards committees, and then obviously community. And then we could foresee developing resources that facilitate the proliferation of this concept, and that we also see that this concept could be quickly developed through demonstration and refined. So we see that this is really at a demonstration phase. So next we have our other poll questions.
So here's question 4. What facets of SolarMAR would you like to learn more about? I apologize. I set this up as single choice. This really should have been multiple choice. I think it's too late to go back in and change the settings. So if you decide all of the above, feel free to share in chat that all of the above are of interest to you. There's a little bit of text here, so we'll give folks some extra time to think this through.
Still good information here coming through.
Yeah. We're at about 58% participation rate. So let's take another 10 seconds or so. Daniel's interested in all of the above. Thanks, Daniel. And Dave, thank you.
While we're wrapping that up, I'll just note Peter did respond to a question about the Williamson Act contracts in the chat.
So let's,
Okay.
you want to take a look at these responses?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Share the results with the group so everyone can take a quick peek. A lot of folks are interested in understanding the full potential of acres and land, groundwater recharge, and solar power potential production. Handful of folks in the engineering details, another number of people interested in business, community engagement, program development. So effectively, all of the above.
Great.
Okay. Let me know when you'd like me to launch poll 5.
Sure. Why don't we? And then we can go into Q&A.
Yeah, I think we can point out. So we're done with our prepared slides. We have a few questions here to jump off conversation, but I think we can also just smoothly go into the discussion comments.
Okay.
But what did you want to cover questions 5 and 6 now or after the Q&A?
No, yeah, I think we can go into the polls now, but I just was telling people that this is sort of as part of getting the juices flowing for the discussion.
Yeah, right. That's what these are designed for. Yeah.
Okay, poll 5. Here we go. Oh no, hold on. I lost my button.
Oh,
There we go. Poll 5, launching. Do you think SolarMAR should be at least fully investigated as a concept? Yes, enthusiastically. Yes, but I'm a little bit skeptical. Or nope. Good, results coming in. Or more, I think we're almost done with the popcorn in the microwave. Ready to share here. All right, I'm going to share out results. 73% of you who participated say yes, enthusiastically. The rest of you said yes. We've got a couple of reservations, but no one said no.
interesting.
Yeah.
And we could do poll 6.
Poll 6. Here we go. Would you be interested in partnering with this team to further develop the SolarMAR model? Yes or no? I will let folks know because you had to register for the LunchMAR series, we can export yes responses. So we'll be able to see who says,
so be careful.
I think. so be careful. You may get a couple of follow-up emails from the team here. We'll leave this one open for a couple more seconds in case you can find yourself a few potential partners in here. And of course, Peter, Gerald, and Brian will share their contact information with you all. I think they have that on the slide or on that presenter slide. Great. All right. We share these results. You've got 24 yeses here, so that's great. 63% of folks. So
Fantastic. Yeah, and we'll have our contact on the last slide. So people, please capture that.
right.
Let's see. And then here's our sort of discussion.
I think Camion, I mean, you're up.
Yeah,
There you go, yeah.
and maybe while folks are gearing up for the discussion, can we, Gerald, put your contact slide up, and that way
Yes.
people can jot that down if they want to contact you.
Okay.
And all of the questions that were in the chat, I believe were responded to, and maybe here I'll invite folks to welcome to open your mics and comment or ask questions of the team, the team of presenters.
Also, I was just putting the link for the May 3rd 180-day temporary permit workshop registration link in the chat. That's actually from 9 to noon. And then we've got a LunchMAR session from 12:30 to 1:30 that same day. If you're registered for this, you're registered for the full series of LunchMAR events. The link is the same. So expect to.
This Kamiar, so I know during the presentation, certainly Brian noted that doing a pilot would be very helpful to go from concept to showing the benefits on the ground, so to speak. I know the last poll question asked if people would be interested to working with the team. Is the team also looking seriously at doing a pilot here in California?
The research team, is that
Yes, the
yeah,
research
oh,
team.
absolutely, we are, yes. Yeah. We believe that's probably the next step in fully developing the concept is demonstration.
Thank you.
The other, I see there's a couple hands up. Kamar, there's Graham
Yes,
and Stefan.
let's go with Stefan or Stephen.
Hi, yeah, thanks. This is really interesting. I'm wondering how much contact have you had with active farmers in this, and how was their mindset going into, you know, converting some of their ag land to solar? For instance, I know we have brought it up here in the Sacramento County area, and we get quite a bit of mixed reactions with some folks saying we absolutely don't want to take, you know, productive agriculture out of that, but also understanding that we do need to change some things to help us out with our water situation.
The group here in California has not yet taken that step. I know, Brian, you have obviously done so in your work. I wonder if there's any parallels that you might be able to draw upon.
Yeah, and I would say that kind of the mixed reaction is very clear. A lot of it is because solar is a land use that is different than most land uses, and people sometimes don't quite understand kind of what those differences are. We have seen actually some places in other parts of the country at the local level where they want to make sure that they protect ag land over the long run, will actually provide where the local government has land use control. They will issue an interim use permit for the tenure of the solar farm, like 25 years or whatever that may be. And then they will have the opportunity at the end of that 25 years, when the developer or the owner, I guess in that case, would come back and say, gee, I would like to continue to operate this as a solar farm, they can actually say, no, we want to turn it back into agriculture. And if you've done the ground cover right, what you've been doing over those 25 years is basically building soil health and enhancing that as an agricultural resource. Now, so we do have actually some solar developers as well who have mentioned this as a distinct possibility. I'm of the opinion that the solar industry is not going to want to let go of that site after 25 years. But if the permit is in the hands of the local government in that case, or the state government, as the case may be, that there is an opportunity. We've also seen a lot of farmers who actually see this as an opportunity to escape what they consider to be a regulatory burden, which is in the Midwest, where we have nitrate problems, of nitrate regulation, because where the nitrates are already contaminating the source water supplies, there is extra steps that the agricultural producer has to take in order to meet regulatory standards. They have to change their business practices. Sometimes they have to implement other kinds of best practices that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And so they actually see this as a financially as a better alternative. They can continue to farm areas that are not impacted by those regulations, or for where they can do the best practices more easily, while they get a different revenue, a different diversity of income from the solar than they would have from their cash crops they're growing, the commodities they're growing elsewhere. But there is a question of how do you integrate these solar farms in an area that's agricultural, so that you can kind of achieve those goals. And what we have discovered is that the agricultural advocates like this concept, because they would rather, if there's going to be agriculture taken out of production, they would rather have it be where agriculture is challenged than where agriculture is not challenged. So that's kind of one of the questions that comes up.
Awesome. And Tamara, I noticed that Graham also has a.
Go ahead, Graham, please.
Oh, yeah, thanks. You may have covered this and I may have missed it, but one of the benefits of flooding is benefits to birds and fish, typically. Are birds and fish going to like, hate, or be indifferent to these in the middle of their giant lake or pond? Or is work being pursued in that direction?
You mean how are they going to react to the solar?
Yeah, so open water is,
okay.
Key habitat for birds, as well as, recent work shows incredible benefits for salmon.
Yes.
I don't imagine you want to have these on an active floodplain, but maybe, in a quieter type of floodplain environment where the salmon can really flourish, perhaps. But might these play a role there, or it seems like that's something that needs to be looked into.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I'm quite certain that there has, if you combine the habitat question in open water with the solar, it has not been studied. There has been work done on what they call photovoltaics, which is solar that is actually floating on our surface water, but those are almost always reservoir systems. Or human created systems rather than natural ones. So so the ecological kind of benefit as it relates to that particular kind of habitat, that would be something that we would need to take a look at. I think that's one of those research questions that for which there's not an answer now.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And there is another question in the chat from Chad. Chad, would you like to open your mic and ask it? And if not, I'm happy to read it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me ask the question. I was trying to get an idea of what is the range of income for the landowner. Because this does really seem to fit well with land repurposing efforts to reduce groundwater extraction demand, and gives the farmer and those landowners of agricultural lands maybe another option. But just for my own information, I'd like to get an idea of, what that offset or what that income level might be, or the range.
Brad, do you know lease offerings? I mean, they're going to be higher out here where they can support, the power's more expensive, but what about lease rates, typical lease rates for?
Lease rates for solar, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm actually not. I actually am not familiar with the specific lease rates in solar, but
Yeah.
what we have seen in almost every instance is that the rents from a solar lease is going to be anywhere from 2 to 4 times as high as it is from agricultural rents. Now that that would be something to look at a little more closely, obviously in a California context and in the Central Valley, because we haven't looked at it. But I would doubt that maybe because that agriculture in the Central Valley is in fact competing as a commodity against other forms of agriculture, all other places in the country. I wouldn't imagine that the lease rates for agriculture are going to be substantially higher than they are for other kind of agricultural land elsewhere in the country. So I would guess that math would probably be somewhere in the same vicinity.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll note that Michael Koparski with UC Berkeley has put in a resource in the chat to share with you. And then John Brody just added something in the chat. John, would you like to open your mic and ask or comment?
Yeah, sure. It was just I was involved in a webinar a few months ago. American Farmland Trust, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and others have developed a tool that identifies the most productive farmland we have here in the valley. And the goal of that, because of Sigma, we know between 500,000 and 1 million acres of productive farmland has to be taken out of production if we're going to meet the goals of Sigma. So the tool is designed to make sure that the most productive farmland stays in farming, and it's, I guess, for lack of a better term, lesser quality farmland that maybe gets repurposed. So, I wonder if the team has heard of this tool, and if that would be something you'd be interested in working with as you look for some projects.
Very much. Yes, please. John, you're down the hill from us, is that right? On the Berkeley campus?
No, I'm actually in Los Banos.
Okay.
That was Michael
So over the
Koparski
hill.
at Berkeley.
Okay. We'd love to know more. So offline, I've written down your contact, and I was gonna contact you after this.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sounds like a nice another layer of the analysis that Gerald was showing earlier.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
And I'll just note, American Farmland Trust, we are working with them on some of these concepts already. So, and I'm not familiar with that particular tool, but there are similar tools that they have elsewhere. They kind of once again identify, where are your most productive areas and what do you want to prioritize? And that's that's the first question we have to ask on co-benefits is a deciding question. Where do you want to site this stuff in order to capture the co-benefits?
Right. And you could probably combine that with the aerial electromagnetic surveys that DWR did that shows where the best recharge areas are.
Yeah, the SAGB
Absolutely.
soils, yeah, index.
Yeah, I think
The
Gerald,
area is slightly different, but yeah, same
AM
kind of idea.
data
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
will
Okay.
update the SAGB. So that would be another layer. And certainly DWR would be happy to share that information with your team.
Excellent. Okay.
Michael Koparski, would you like to open your mic and add in? So I see he did put in he put a resource, but he also said a key point is that there are many potential variables to consider, and finding the least conflict areas for solar may involve a multifaceted analysis. Great to see you're doing this work.
Great comment. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have a question or comment before we turn it back to you, Megan?
Maybe this is Mike. I could add one other thing to the, in addition to Ethan's report that I put in the in the chat, which I think will be really useful to you. And forgive me if since I missed the beginning of the presentation, so this might have been covered. But if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like your analysis is using SAGD as the main kind of physical parameter for figuring out where recharge siting can go, and there's been a lot of work that probably most of the people on this call are aware of, including from Andy Fisher's group and Helen Dalka's group, looking at much more precise estimate, precise ways to find out where recharge will actually be effective, and that goes far beyond just the soils. So there's lots of resources out there for you to check out.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Megan, to wrap up in the last minute.
Thanks, Kamyar. I just wanted to share one more announcement that Thomas Harder sent along to me. So passing it on in the chat, UCNANR is offering once more their groundwater watersheds and groundwater sustainability planning online short course. Starts next week, April 13th. So the link's in there too. And I just wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to our 3 presenters today, and also Margaret, of course, who wasn't able to be here with us today, but they did a lot of prep work and put a lot of thought into today's discussion. And another heartfelt thanks to all of you who joined us for our lunch session today. It was great attendance, great participation, and really appreciate your time. And thank you, Kamyar, for hosting, of course. It's all of your participation that makes the work a true collaborative.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Take care.
All right.
Nicely done, Megan.